When I was a teenager, I sometimes read scripture at my church on Christmas. It was a small Episcopal church in Tennessee, maybe 60 people in the pews. And every year, the reading started the same way. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. I said those words out loud. I pronounced them carefully, but I had no idea what they actually meant. All the world should be enrolled. What does that even look like? Who was Caesar Augustus? Why does Luke start the most important birth in history with a government enrollment? I read right past it, every year. Then years later, as I was working on this channel, I started looking at that passage again, and for the first time I saw what was behind those words. Not just a census, a system. Not just a decree, a plan, and not Caesar's plan. My eyes were opened to a whole new sense of wonder in God's design. The Roman Empire at its height stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. And the man who ruled it all, Caesar Augustus, bore a title that would sound familiar to anyone who read the Gospels. Devi Filius, the Son of God. That's what his coin said. That's what his inscriptions declared. Caesar Augustus, the Son of God. And this emperor, whose coins bore the title Son of God, issued a decree. Every person in the empire must be enrolled. Everyone. An enrollment covering the entire Roman world. Administrators in every province. Scribes in every town. Records flowing back to Rome from the edges of the known world. One authority, one system, one purpose, to register, count, and control. This was a centralized ledger. Caesar built it. Caesar owned it. Caesar used it for his purposes. Every name, every family, every location, recorded and held by a single power. Now, scholars have debated the exact dating of the census for centuries. Luke's mention of Quirinius as governor of Syria doesn't line up neatly with other historical records. We'll set that question aside because the structure Luke describes is what matters for our story. And that structure is unmistakable. One empire collecting data on everyone from the top down. 700 years before Caesar Augustus issued his decree, a prophet named Micah wrote something remarkable about a town so small it barely appeared on a map. But you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come from me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Bethlehem, that's where the Messiah would be born. Micah said it, 700 years before it happened. But there was a problem. Mary and Joseph didn't live in Bethlehem. They lived in Nazareth, 70 miles north, in Galilee. Wrong town. And then Caesar issued his decree. According to Luke, everyone had to go to their ancestral city to be enrolled. Joseph belonged to the house and line of David. David's city was Bethlehem. So Joseph packed up and traveled south with Mary, who was expecting a child. Caesar Augustus, the man whose coins called him the Son of God, issued a decree to count his subjects. And in doing so, he moved the right woman to the right town at the right time to give birth to the actual Son of God. Caesar thought this was about Roman power. It was about a promise God made 7 centuries earlier. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a watercourse wherever he pleases. Caesar signed the decree. God wrote the plan. Luke gives us one detail that's easy to miss. And everyone went to their own town to register. Not where you live, where your family is from. Whether this was standard Roman practice or something specific to Judea's tribal traditions, the purpose was the same. Your identity was tied to your lineage. You are who your ancestors were. your town, your tribe, your family line. That's how the system knew you. Joseph went to Bethlehem because he was of the house and line of David. His identity wasn't verified by a document or a seal. It was verified by a chain of ancestry stretching back generations, connecting him to a place and a people. That's an ancient form of identity verification, not a password, not a signature, a lineage. 2,000 years later, Bitcoin asks the same question: how do you prove who you are? But answers it in a completely different way. Instead of community and ancestry, it uses mathematics. Instead of a scribe checking your family line, an algorithm verifies your cryptographic key. Different technology, same fundamental question. How do you prove who you are through a chain that can be traced? Rome didn't just register Jesus' birth. It tried to destroy what came after. For nearly 300 years, wave after wave of persecution. Under Nero, Christians were burned alive to light the emperor's garden. Over the next 2 centuries, it happened again and again, each time more systematic, each time failing to erase the faith. Under Diocletian, churches were razed, scriptures were burned, and believers were executed across the empire. Rome had every advantage: the largest army in the world, total political control, the full machinery of an empire aimed at erasing a faith that started with a handful of fishermen and a carpenter's son. It didn't work. In the early 300s, Constantine legalized Christianity. And within a generation, the empire that had persecuted the faith became its greatest carrier. Roman roads that once carried legions now carried missionaries. Roman infrastructure that administered an empire now administered a church. The Latin language that issued death sentences now carried the gospel to every corner of Europe. The very institution that carries Rome's name, the Roman Catholic Church, is present in virtually every nation on earth. The legions that built the empire, a memory. The system that fought the faith ended up serving it. Again, just like the census. So what happened to Caesar's census? The enrollment that spanned an entire empire. Where is it? Gone. Centralized records controlled by one authority dependent on one empire. When the empire fell, the records fell with it. Caesar's ledger, the system that moved Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem, is lost. The centralized records didn't survive the empire that created them. But the record of what happened that night in Bethlehem? Still here, 2,000 years later. Not because an empire preserved it, not because an empire archived it. In the first 3 centuries, before any church had institutional power, before there were cathedrals or councils or a Vatican, the text survived because scattered communities of believers each held their own copies. Small churches in Antioch, Alexandria, Rome, Carthage. No central authority, no headquarters, no master copy. Just ordinary people across continents copying the text by hand and carrying it forward. No single point of failure. No emperor who could erase it. If Rome burned every copy in one city, the text survived in a dozen others. And centuries later, when critics challenged the story, when scholars questioned whether the text had been altered or invented, manuscript discoveries kept confirming what those early copies said. Early papyrus fragments from Egypt, some dating to within a century of the events themselves. Codex after codex, matching across regions and generations. The record held up under scrutiny because it had never depended on a single source. What emerged was a network maintained by thousands of independent participants, each holding a copy. No central authority that can alter it or shut it down. The record survives because it's everywhere. A centralized system, no matter how powerful, is only as durable as the authority behind it. Caesar's empire fell, and his records vanished. A distributed network maintained by people who believe in what they're preserving is something else entirely. That's what kept the Gospels alive. And 2,000 years later, it's how Bitcoin works today. I stood in that church as a teenager and read those words without understanding them. Now I see it. God used the most powerful empire on earth to fulfill his plan. And the story outlasted the empire. Not because anyone was in charge of protecting it, but because ordinary people carried it. Kind of like an ancient blockchain. Next time, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And in the beginning, Satoshi created Block Zero with a hidden message about bank bailouts. I'm Patrick, and this is the Gospel of Bitcoin.